What's up, everyone, and hope you guys all had a great week again. I know we had some much more beautiful weather this week than we have had in a long time. So today, like I said last week, we're going to talk about some of the signs and symptoms and some of the recognition signs when you are looking for signs of stress in yourself. All right? We have our physical, our cognitive, our spiritual, our emotional or behavioral, or our interpersonal reactions. Okay, so those are the 5 key areas that we're going to look at some of the recognizing signs or symptoms or reactions that we may have to stress. Now, like we did in the first video and like we did in the first activity, make sure you document how many of these you actually have. All right? Not to say that only if you have one you don't have stress, because everybody has stress differently, but that's just to say if you have all of them, you're probably higher on the stress scale. And if you only have 1 or 2, you're probably on the lower end. But it just depends on which 1 or 2 it is. It depends on the situation, and it depends on you. Ready? So let's go through it. Let's create a list of all, not all, most of the signs and symptoms and reactions that you may face when facing stress. Ready? So our physical reactions to stress. We have sleep disturbances, shallow breathing, loss of appetite, loss of sleep. You may have an increased heart rate. You're tired all the time. You have headaches or panic attacks. You may feel numb when you don't typically feel numb. You'll have aches and pains or nausea, or you may feel like throwing up, or you may actually throw up because you're so sick to your stomach. And you may have extreme muscle tension, especially in the shoulders and the back of your neck. All right, and your feet and your legs as well, especially depending on what type of job you work. And trembling, okay? You can't control it. You're shaking all the time. All right, when you're trying to carry a plate to the kitchen table, right? You can hear the jittering of the plate, ching, 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 ching. We have our cognitive reactions, okay? So this is dealing with our memory and our mind. Confusion, difficulty concentrating, difficulty analyzing certain situations, maybe situations that might have felt normal to you before, and it's difficult for you to analyze now. Disorientation, right? You lose all objectivity. It's all about you all of a sudden. Or alternatively, you may not even care. You may have difficulty calculating. And when we say that, we're talking about calculating distances, calculating money, calculating simple math. From point A to point B, you decide to do this rather than a straight line, right? Difficulty calculating your distances or your path or your travel, or whatever the case is. Okay, we have memory loss. We have difficulty making decisions. You become very complacent. You really have limited attention span when talking to somebody or when doing a certain task. Even if it requires little or no attention, you may not even be thinking about it. Think about this. When was the last time you were taking a shower? This happens to me sometimes. You're in the shower, getting ready for work. Okay, you get in, you're soaping your body, and then all of a sudden your mind starts racing on all the things that you have to do. And now it's showering. Like, you don't think about it. You just kind of do it, right? All of a sudden now, you turn the water off and you think to yourself, did I shampoo my hair? It's wet, obviously, but I don't remember if I actually shampooed myself or not. So what do? You turn the water back on, shampoo your hair, shampoo it again, and you move on with your day, right? You're not concentrating on the task at hand, even though it's a simple task, because your mind's wandering elsewhere. Ever driven to work and realized, how did I get here? What happened? Like, I know the route I roughly took, but I don't actually remember getting to work, right? Because your mind's racing and thinking about other things, all the things you may need to do that day, that week, that month, whatever the case is. You have difficulty setting priorities for yourself, and you have an inability to stop thinking about a certain incident or a certain cause of stress, whether that's an individual, whether that's your work, whether that's a certain traumatic situation, whatever the case is, you have trouble concentrating and moving on from that. We have our spiritual reactions. So we question faith. We have this anger towards God or a higher being or a higher person. You may even withdraw from faith or religion. You start questioning good versus evil. Why did that happen to me? What was the cause of that? Why would God allow that to happen to me? You start redefining your own moral values. Is this something that I truly believe in anymore? You try to find that meaning or that cause. Why did this happen? You may have even emotional numbness where nothing affects you, nothing phases you anymore. You just don't care. For some, alternatively, you might have this spiritual awakening. It may draw you towards religion. It may draw you towards spirituality. You may promise or bargain or challenge that God. And when we talk about God, we're talking about a higher being here. Whether you believe in a Christian God or any other type of higher being, whatever the case is, that's what we're talking about here. And you start to have concern for vengeance, justice, or forgiveness. When we talk about emotional or behavior reactions, we're talking about that high anxiety or fear of the situation happening again, fear of what's going to happen next, fear of what happens if I speak out. You may be startled easier. Okay, you have this increased startle response. You may feel helpless. You may feel overprotected now, or have that feeling of overprotectiveness. You have the sleep disturbances like we talked about earlier. But on the positive side, there may actually be an overproductiveness that you may be feeling because you can't sleep. You want to take your mind off of things, so you're just focused on work, do it. I gotta keep busy, I gotta keep doing stuff, and there's this overproductive response, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at some point you need to take a break, right? So it could be a bad thing. Despair, you have nightmares, you have reoccurring thoughts of the situation that happened. Again, whether it's a person, place, thing, situation, whatever the case is. You may draw to drug or alcohol abuse to cope. Withdrawal from family and friends. You have these intrusive thoughts or negative thoughts about even self-harm or harm to others because of what happened. Increased nervousness or panic when maybe approaching a situation. You get into a bad car accident and you're worried about driving again, right? There's that panic when trying to get back into that car and do the same routine all over again because you're worried of what's going to happen, if something's going to happen. You may increase in violence yourself, right? Short-tempered, short-fused because of that stress. Depression and even avoidance, right? Somebody approaches you and says, hey, I noticed that you have all these different signs and symptoms and reactions. Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Don't bug me. Or if you see somebody wanting to approach you, you turn the other way and go the other way. And the last one is interpersonal reactions, right? And that leads us into that category. You have that withdrawal from family and coworkers as well. Withdrawal from different organizations, whether it's religious organizations, whether it's self-help organizations, whether it's work organizations, sport organizations, whatever the case is, you start to pull yourself out of those. You isolate yourself. You discontinue any educational pursuits, whether that's your master's degree, your PhD, your college, university, you drop out because it's just too overwhelming, you're not into it anymore. There's a lack of community or involvement. You have difficulty sharing your ideas because you're worried that somebody's going to shut them down, somebody's not going to care. You become intolerant of group processes. You just want to do everything yourself, and it's got to be your way or the highway. You start blaming and criticizing other people. You start to become extremely negative towards others. Why? Because you want to bring them down to your level. You become disrespectful and impatient with other people. You have trouble listening to them, even though they're trying to help you. And you have difficulty giving or even accepting help. All right, again, that goes to avoidance. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be on my own. I want to be by myself, and I just want to deal with it my own way. All right? These are all different reactions and different signs and symptoms. Now, that was a lot, I know, but try to think back, how many of those do you experience in any type of your stressful situations, right? Last week I had you list everything that happened to you this week and all the different stressful situations that caused you a different feeling than you normally would have felt. Everything. Okay? That could have been your drive to work, right? For us here in Canada, it was, or at least Ontario, it was March break. So there was a lot less people on the roads when you're driving, a lot less headaches in that sense. But of course, I know a lot of people that flew away on vacation and weren't able to come back home because all the 737 jets were actually being pulled from the air, right? So they had to get delayed, and that caused additional stress, additional response. On top of that, in the news, the airports had a fire in it, so they actually closed the whole terminal, delayed more flights. Could you imagine how much stress that caused you on a week of vacation, on a week just had to come back and you can't even get back home out of Canada or even into Canada? Stranded on the tarmac for 4 or 5 hours in an airplane? Could you imagine the stress that those people have felt? in that situation. For others, it may have been better of a week because it was March break, less road, less work, or conversely, because people took the time off, more work. So how did that make you feel with the reactions that we just listed? Did you have a lot of them? A little bit? The best thing, and there's no right or wrong answer here, the best thing is for you to know how you react to a certain situation, emotionally, behaviorally, cognitively, physically, spiritually, how you reacted to certain situations, and that way you know when you start to see those reoccurring signs, reactions, that you start to know how to deal with them. You start to know how to handle them. All right? Next week, we're going to start talking about, get more into detail on how to help, how to cope, how to self-care, and all the different things. Of course, we're not going to talk about absolutely everything. Again, everybody's differently, but we're going to talk about how we can try to minimize some of those symptoms. And we're going to continue on with our self-care plan. And by the end of this series, you all are going to have a full self-care plan that you can refer back to when something is occurring. All right? Hope you guys all have a great week. I know it's supposed to be a beautiful rest of the week. Take care, and we will see you all later. All right, I know there was a lot of signs and symptoms, reactions that I just went through with you all, but again, like I mentioned, I just want you to jot down, figure out how you react to certain situations. Could be work stresses, it could be athletic stresses, it could be family stresses, it could be driving stresses, it could be vacation stresses. Okay, we all know that vacation is usually a time for relaxation, but sometimes vacation causes additional stress. You lose a bag, you lose your stuff, your plane gets derailed, your plane gets delayed, weather, whatever the case is, and you can't get home after your vacation, you may be stranded. So sometimes vacation causes stress. So I just want you to remember all of these signs and symptoms that affect you, how they affect you, and next week we're going to talk about how we can reduce some of those symptoms. All right, as always, subscribe up here. Last video was up here, and we'll see you guys all later. Take care.